using the JSONPlaceholder API. We can get there by just going to JSONPlaceholder.typecode.com, and it's basically just like a free API that you can use to like test out, you any type of API call you want to make. So just go there and then you scroll down, and at resources you basically see like some of the resources we can use. And it's like pretty much different APIs. So we're gonna be using the Photos API, and this is what it's gonna look like. We're pretty much just gonna load this up and display it in SwiftUI app. So let's minimize this and then let's jump into UI. Let's jump into Xcode, building it with a SwiftUI app. All right, so app. Then for the name, let's just go with Photos app. Custom, no, JSON app. Sometimes, like literally, just creating the name is sometimes time consuming. All right, great. Look like I added test too. I really need this run, but so let's just close that, and then let's maximize. And I'm gonna switch iPhone simulator. That way we can just see it and load it way faster. Yeah, so we're showing it now. So if anybody new don't really know what I'm doing, I'm pretty much the name of this app that I'm using is Xcode, and the language that we're going to use, our tool that we're going to use to create the app is called Swift, but the tool in Swift that we're using is SwiftUI today, and that's what making it that we can see this app right here. You see the image, you see the globe. If I should remove something, so notice the preview over here. Then load. Forgot to remove this. Yeah, or if I should add some, like change this, then load. And as you can see, all I had to do to get some text on the screen is just pretty much write this text element right here. That's from SwiftUI, and then just put in what I want that text. All right. Anyways, that's just for the people getting used to SwiftUI. So let's jump into this. So as I said, like what I want us to do is reading that data, JSON placeholder here. So we need this endpoint. So I'm gonna grab the endpoint now. Just gonna do a quick copy to get that. Then I'm gonna jump back over here. Minimize some. I want to make one. I want to have this. So I'm thinking that I want to have this in a way where it's inside like a tab view. So I'll replace this stack with a tab view. And then let's create a new folder, and that's what's gonna have. Like you see that just having the tab view here basically let me get this bottom bar that you see in most apps, pretty much all apps, and that's how you switch to different sections of the screens or something. But we want to have a screen where we're gonna show all the photos. Let's make that screen. We'll start by making like a folder, new folder. We call this photos screen. And we'll add our first file to that. Let's add like a SwiftUI file called photos. All right, let's just preview. Okay, so whenever you create a new SwiftUI file to create a new SwiftUI screen, Apple kind of just gives you this template, and it kind of starts off with "Hello World." But yeah, we're gonna update that so it actually shows like a list of like all of the photos that we get from the API. But for now, let's just make it that we can use our photos view inside our content view that has our tab view. So let's just do this by saying photos view, and then before I do this, sometimes previews can be annoying and take a while to. I'll do quick load the preview. Oh yeah, it's actually showing the Photos app it's showing the right screen because the photos have actually only has hello world in it. But what I want to do is, you know, like how in our tab views, we always have that bottom bar here. I want to add that. So to add that, you do tab item. And I want it to be like an image and then like some text under this under that image saying like photos. So to do that, I'm gonna do image. And that's what I love about SwiftUI. Like you can literally just type in what you want. So I want an image I kind of started typing in image view provided by Apple. And we have system images. So this is a way how we can just use images provided by Apple. So I'm not a designer, just a developer, not good with creating UI. So this is really helpful. And you can know what images are available by getting this app called SF Symbols. I'll just open this real quick. And you see that just by typing photo here, I got this image here. So jump into SF Symbols just so you can. All right, so this is SF Symbols. Basically, all the images that you might want to see, might want to use. And all you have to do is just pretty much just copy the name and then we'll see it. If I minimize this, anyways, yeah, I scroll down, I maximize it. So that just by typing photo in here, I'm seeing this photo and it's the same photo shown here. If I should change to typing photo fill, I'll see this. This is really similar, so you might not notice the difference. So I'm gonna try photo.stack and you'll see that it updates here. Yeah, you see updates right there? Yeah, but I prefer photos, so I'm just gonna stick with photo. So anyways, let's just close SF Symbols now and jump back to Xcode. But I love that. Like, I'm not good with images. I don't really want to pay for image like custom images. So that's a good way to do it. So the next thing is that like we're gonna add like text here. And this is just gonna say photos. Or we could have to say the feed. It could be like a feed of posts. Yeah, could do that. Alright, now we're going with photos. Let's just stick with that for now. Alright, so photos here. And now we still see, so this is our tab view. What we can do to see it a little bit different is actually run the code. What happens when we run it instead of just relying just on the previews. Might take some time, get everything running. Okay, maybe it didn't take some time. Patch folder. All right, so I'll put that here, and while that run, yeah. All right, so yeah, you see here it has the photos tab bar there, and we still have the hello world. But now let's work on replacing the hello world with actually just like a basic list view with some static data now, and then we'll add in some of the actual images from the API. Let's close this. Yeah, that was crashed because I closed the simulator before stopping it from Xcode. So now let's jump back to our photos view. And we can have our preview start running again. And one thing the first thing we want to do then is we want to have a list of photos. And I think the API is going to return some text. So it returns text. Yes, we want to show that, and it provides a URL that we can use to show the image. It has some album ID and some ID, but honestly, we don't really need that right now. It has a sister API. I think it's called comments or so that I think we could use that with, but probably do that in a different stream. All right, so let's get rid of this text since we want to show something different, and let's start by adding. And let's do a navigation stack for now. And the reason why I'm thinking we could add a navigation stack is, one, we want to add like a title, a navigation title, and we also want to add like a title. Let me add the navigation title first so you know what I'm even talking about. So we'll add a navigation title by adding this modifier. Modifier is like pretty much any that pretty much function, or so I don't know if you call them, but these are modifiers that you call by writing like that on the view, and like it's whatever feature kind of you want to add to that view. So right now I want to add a feature where it has a title. A title I want it to be basic as ever. Actually, let's make this photos again. And it's at the top right now. It's at the top right now, but actually make this like smaller version as you see on like a bunch of different apps by adding a different modifier. So like any features I want to add to this V stack, I add it by adding a modifier, and I do it like this. So with like navigation display type or title display mode, and that long name, you could just be like inline. And see that the title is kind of jumped there. The next thing I want to do now is work on adding like a list. This is like a list of like the data that we kind of want to show. So we'll be like list. You have to love SwiftUI. Just to get a list, you just literally just type out a list. So do that and just okay. Yeah, so we'll do that by creating like a list right here, and then like whatever we want to show in the list. So just as a reminder, for our list, we want to show the photos and some text. So we could create like a basic view just to show that, like our prototype. So let's start with just the image first. So we want an image on top, so let's try with that. But no, we're gonna use like a system image. And if when we actually get the API running, we're gonna get rid of this and use a downloaded image from the API. So for this, let's load photo stack. And then you see literally updates right here. Zoom in again in our preview. Okay, it updates right there in our preview. And you can add just so like you see like I was adding modifiers for this V stack. I was adding these modifiers V stack. I can add modifiers to a list or an image. So right now I'm thinking like what I'm gonna add is like a modifier to make the image much bigger. So I'll be like, I gotta add a resizable just to make it that know that we wanna make some changes to like the frame, the width and the height. And we'll be like width, height. Then for width, I feel like I'm gonna just do 300 and then just a height 300. Yeah, that's too big. So let's do 200 and then just a height 200. Yeah, that looks decent enough. And like you see how the screen looks right now, this is like the default layout for like lists. So it's one cell, so it's kind of hard to tell that like more than one thing is in here. So I'm just gonna copy this temporary just so you can see it, but I'll change the name to some photo. Okay, so you know you see it's like two different elements or rows in a list. One thing we can do too is change the style of the list that we have. So again, all we have to do to add that feature, add a modifier. So we go down to lists and just look for where that curly brace ends. And then we just type list style. Simple and to the point. Love SwiftUI. So one of the list styles that we have right are like plain. You see changes right away. Or we have inset. I forgot what inset is. But honestly, I feel like I like what we had, which is inset grouped more. But we can just get rid of that since it's like the default type. All right, so we have honestly get rid of this extra image. And now we want to add, say, a text under the screen because from the API it has like some extra information that the user can add. So we'll do like text. And we'll make it that this text says something. Okay, let's just say some having right there. And if you look right now, you see like it added it as a separate element, but I want all this to be in the same row. I want this to just be one row. And the reason how we can fix that is by adding all of this inside a VStack. A VStack makes it that all the elements inside of it will be stacked on top of her, going down. So it will be like one thing here, and other thing, other thing, and other thing. You have 8 stacks too, which will do things horizontally. So it's like either doing things vertically, horizontally, or you can use a Z stack, which is putting things on top of each other. All right, so let's just copy this. Put that. We'll paste that here. And now you see it appears as like one pretty much element. I kind of like this so far. Pretty simple and to the point. What I want to do though is make it that this is aligned more to the left. So I'll do like frame, width. I think it's like max is infinity, and then I'll do alignment left thing. Okay, you see how the image kind of focuses to the left, and I want the I see how the text kind of focuses to the left, aligns to the left, but the image still is centered, and that's because everything inside this V stack right now is aligned center by default. Okay. Something happened with the preview. Let me just rerun this more so it can get some energy. And then let's just rerun our preview. Okay, good. All right, so now we have like a basic way of what we want each row to look like. But I don't want the list. I don't want our row to just be inside our list like this. So we're gonna make a custom view that represents like each row in our list. So let's just cut this. And then we're gonna go to the Photos app. We're gonna create a new photo folder. And we're gonna call this Photos Row View. And then let's just add a new SwiftUI file first. I'm gonna call this literally Photos Row View too. We're gonna pretty much just paste exactly what we had from the previous screen, and we're gonna put it in here. So I'm just gonna do command pasting that. I see it loads here. It's a little bit aligned here to the left, to the edges of the screen. What we can do is add like say padding to our V stack, or we could just add it to say padding the leading. Okay. And then we're just gonna jump back over to our close that, and then jump back over to our photos view, and then use just calling photos row view here, and we get the same thing. One thing I feel like I'm noticing here is that like you see how I added the padding inside that photos row view, it kind of messed up the padding here. So we can jump back there and remove it because we don't basically need it, at least not when it's being reused right there. And then if we jump back here, you see that it's handled fine because of the constraints are like the list providing for like its row element. All right, so now we got it working with like some basic static data. So now let's introduce some actual. Okay, yeah. So now let's introduce some actual API and use that data. Ready. So to use this data, we're gonna need so I'm thinking we're gonna use MVVM just for the architecture. That was a plan, but I kind of wanted to do it slow pace. The MVVM, I'll talk about that later. So we're gonna use MVVM, and we need a service that we can use to actually get the data from the API endpoint. So we're gonna do two things. We're gonna create that service right now, and then we're going to end up creating some models, and then we're going to jump into our MVVM, our view model. Don't worry. It sounds crazy, but I got you. So what we're going to do now is create a new folder. Actually, we don't. we're gonna create a new folder and we're gonna call this services. And this is the logic, you can say, for the service layer logic for getting the data from API. So say like API services. That's it. And then inside here, we're gonna make a regular Swift file, not a SwiftUI file. Services. And then what I like to do, especially if you're trying to do more testing, is use a protocol just to represent the data that we're going to use. And this is going to be like a blueprint of what our services API is going to need. So, and it helps with testing because you don't want to use real API calls in your unit testing. So what you can do now, you can make a abstraction, your service call of your service API, of your service layer, and use that in testing. That doesn't make any real API calls. A lot of logic, it's better if like you see me doing it. So we're gonna get into it. So we'll start by creating like a protocol. This is gonna be API services. And then this is just gonna describe the logic that we want. It's gonna the function or the API call that we're gonna make. Yeah. So let's see. It's gonna be like get data, fetch posts, or fetch photos. In this case, fetch photos. Fetch photos. And we're gonna use Swift concurrency with this. So it's gonna be like we're gonna use like async await, which is like Apple's new way or more, better way of handling like API calls. So to do that, we have to make the function know that it's async by marking it with like an async. Also, we want to handle our errors custom by using our own custom errors. So we're gonna need a throws, but I'll add that in later. So what I'm gonna do next is create like a services class. So I'll be like class, now I'm going API services impl. And this is actually gonna be where we have our real service logic to get data from the API. Right. So you'll see that it flags me saying that it requires this function that we just said that anybody that uses this protocol need. I will jump here. And right now, I know we're not returning anything. It's because I'm doing this kind of slow so anybody can follow. So let's back that up here. Okay. So the first thing that we kind of need, one, at least not the first thing, but the next thing we kind of need is we need a model just to represent our data, and we need to get the API endpoint. So let's get the API endpoint first, and then we're gonna start on creating like a model that's gonna represent each row with that data. So we'll say, okay. So let's get the API endpoint. So it's and jump back to Xcode, and we're gonna say like private, like okay. And then we also need, so let's start by, we also need like the model that we're gonna use, and this is gonna be the model that represents the data that we're showing. So basically, we need a way how to zoom in, represent this data in our app, and to do that, we have to use a model. So let's copy what we have here. Or could I just put it on the side? That way you can just slide there, and I'll have Xcode minimize. Just do this. All right, so let's create another folder. I know another folder, right? But this should be probably the last folder we make. So we'll create this folder and we're gonna call this models. Then we'll say new Swift file, not SwiftUI file, and then create another one called Swift file called models. And we're gonna use like a struct, creating a struct, and this struct is gonna be our pretty much our photos. model. I don't really like saying model, adding model to the name. But let's just do it for this case. Yeah. So this is gonna represent this photo model is gonna represent each of these data right here, this information right here. So we need to make it that it can handle it. So we'll start by creating something like let album ID. So creating the replica property by creating a property called let album ID. And as you see over here, it's a string. It's an int. I know it's an int by the type that we have on the other side. So ints, these are ints. This is a string. This looks like it's just a string, but it's actually, you can represent this as well as a URL. And also this one is a URL. You can tell that we should represent it as a URL. So let album ID equal int, and then we'll make another one for album ID equal int to be of type int. And then we'll do title. I'll make it as a type of string, as well as URL, and then make that as URL. And thumbnail URL. Let me this URL. Okay, so now this is gonna represent our data over here as in our app. Let's minimize that and full screen this. And then, so since we want to represent this our data as a model, we have to give this struct an extra ability or make it conform to a protocol. Pretty much like I said, is you're giving it extra ability so that it can be decoded. So to get that, you need to add a conformance to decodable protocol. You need to add a conformance to the decodable protocol. Okay. Okay. Decodable protocol, and then we're gonna jump back finally to our services. I know we know what our model should look like for the data that we're taking in. We're gonna update this, and we're gonna do returns photo model. Okay, it returns an array of photo model. And then we need to update the function that's conforming to it. Okay, so now we have photo model. And it's complaining because it's saying, yo, you're supposed to return something, but we're not returning anything. So I'm just gonna put empty array for now. All right. But what are we gonna do if the API fails? You know what I mean? You gotta think about that. So what I wanted to do, if it fails, if the API fails or there's some issue, I wanted to throw an error. So we have to update our signature in the protocol and in this function just to make it know that we want to handle our errors by throwing. So to do that is mad simple, especially with async await. So you just have to add throws keyword. And then again, you're gonna update this or it's gonna complain. Now we're good. All right, so now API part start so we can get ready. So now we're gonna say, we're gonna convert that endpoint right here. That's a string type to a URL type. So we'll say guard let URL equal URL. We're gonna convert it to a URL and then passing the endpoint. But and then if it fails, if we're unable to convert that string to a URL, we want to throw an error. So the error we want to throw, we want to throw like a custom error. We don't want to show we want to be a custom error that we want to have like a readable text that can be linked to it. So we'll be like, we got to create a custom error now. So for now, let's put this, and then we're going to come back here. We're gonna do a return an empty array for now, and then we're gonna come back here soon. So we're gonna create our custom error. So we start off by making an enum, and we're gonna call this service error. Service error. And okay. But we also need to make it conform to error, or we can use localized error, which has like some extra benefits, especially with SwiftUI apps. You can get like a readable message linked with it. You can get a failure reason linked with it, a bunch of different ways. But you can do it that also by using custom error anyways. So we'll create the first case. The first one we want to do is what happens if like we can't convert the string to the URL. So we'll do case invalid URL. We'll say we want the error to return as an invalid URL. So we'll get rid of this, and we'll replace that with throws service error that invalid URL. Good. The next thing now we want to do now that we have the URL is actually try to use it to get the data from the API. So to do that, we'll be like URL session dot shared, and then we have to use a data task. But we're using async await Swift concurrency, so we have to look for the one that uses Swift concurrency. So we can do data there, and then just look and see for the function that has async throws. Hit enter or whatever you got your keyboard on, and then URL, and we want to, what this is going to return is a tuple with a data and a response. So let's adjust that and say let data response equal URL session that shared dot data. Yeah, calling API. The problem with this though is that this can throw an error, so we have to wrap it in a do catch. So we can start that by, we're gonna get rid of this for 1 second, and then create a do catch. Create a do catch, and then add back that in there, and we need to add try and await. That should be all we need now. So we are gonna get rid of this, but I don't want the error to keep showing and you be confused, so I'll just leave that there for now. But for now, just ignore this. It's just saying it returns an empty array to satisfy this right here. The next thing, what we're gonna do now is we're gonna jump to, one, we need to check the response. We want to check to make sure that the response is of within 200 to 299. Want to check to make sure that it's that, and then we want to decode the data that we have. So for checking the response, we need to convert our response, which is this right here, to a HTTP URL response. We'll do that by saying like, so we could do like guard let HTTP URL response equal response as HTTP URL response. We're casting it to a HTTP URL response. And then here, once we get the HTTP URL response, and we want to check its status code. So to do that, I want to check if it's between 200 and say 299. So I want to see if my status code is between these numbers by checking if it contains, if this are elements of numbers contains my status code from or HTTP URL response. So if it does, that means that it's between these numbers. But if it doesn't, we have to do else, and we have to throw a new error. So we could call this, just for simplicity, invalid status code. Service error. Invalid. All right, so now we have checked that the response is good and it's a correct status code. So let's see if we can start decoding the data. So to decode the data, we use what we want is to be photos. And we're going to use our JSON decoder. We're going to say decode type. The type is going to be our photo model. Remember, we're trying to return this array of photo models, but the API is returning us data. Look at it. I don't know why it's not showing right now, but this is a data type, and we want to convert it to an array of photo models. So we do this, add the dot self, and we want to connect it from data. Okay, we have to also mark this with a try because it can fail. But we're gonna handle our failures in here. But for now, let's just print error. We're gonna jump back to this a little bit later on. So we also know we need to return the photos. Okay. And as I said, we're gonna handle the errors in a few, but since we're returning the photos here, we don't need to do this here. But we still need to at least do something for our catch case. What we want to do is really throw an error here, but for now we're gonna handle getting some data from the API and then showing it in the view. And then we're gonna jump back to update this so that we can show a readable error to the user. So let's jump to our view. And now that our API is set up to get data but not handle errors, which we will handle soon, we need to find some way how to get data from our service and show it in our view. And the way how we're going to do that is using a view model, since we're using the MVVM architecture. So we have to add another file. Told you, not another folder, but a file. And this is going to be a Swift file. So command end. This is going to be photos view model. Photos model. Start my class. Photos view model. And this. Right. And now we need this to handle getting the data, linking with the services to get the data, and then after getting that data, passing it to the view so that the view can show it. So we need to add services as a feature to this photos view model, or better yet, the correct terminology, as a dependency. But it's basically like dependencies are like any additional feature you want to add to like a class or some object. So let's start by doing services. And the feature I want to add, if you remember, is our API service. API services. So I'm not going to type API services info because I want to be able to our view model with a mock API. That'll make sense once we get there, but I'm going to use our protocol instead. So basically I'm saying I want our photos view model to accept a object that conforms, that has the features of API services. That's the only type of object I want for this dependency. And then I have to update our init. And I love this autocomplete feature where it's like the class senses that you have certain properties and you need a custom, and you need to initialize for it. I like this part. Some of the other AI features, I had to turn those off, didn't really like those. But yeah. All right, so now we have this photos view model. We have to introduce it to our view. So we can introduce it to our view by doing, say, at state object. We can also do observed object. But you're gonna notice that we get an error, but I'm gonna show you the fix. But so we're gonna do state object.var. We could say view model, and we can do this two ways. We can do literally just initialize it here. But you're gonna see that it asking me to add our dependency, which is our API service. But I don't want to do that, so I'm gonna jump back here and I'm gonna add like a default value for this, and that's gonna be the actual class that we have that conform to API services or API input Remember, this conforms to API services. Yeah. So once we got that, if we jump back to review, we don't need to do this anymore since Photos view model knows by default that it's using our API services input as a default value. But you see it's complaining still that state object requires that Photos view model conform to observable object. So all we have to do to fix it is that it's saying that anybody that wants to use a state object, they must conform to observable object. Okay, they must conform to observable object. So we get this. And then we'll be like func. And then wait, before we do that, let's just jump back to the view just to make sure that that error is gone. Okay, cool. Let's make that sure that that's gone. And then we're going to jump back to our view model. And we're going to finally write the function that we need to get the data from the API. Cool. The func fetch photos. And it's going to be an async function because remember the function that we created in our services was async. Yeah, it's just concurrency, so it's more than likely going to be async. So we'll start by saying that, so let photos, it could be like let photos. I'm gonna change this in a sec, but just bear with me. And then say services dot fetch photos. Gonna see some errors. So this call can fail, so we have to wrap it in a do catch. And it's asynchronous, so we have to wait on it. So let's get rid of this for 1 second. Write the do catch. And remember, we're not handling errors yet. So you just go ahead with the sprinting. We're gonna handle that in a second. So paste back this. And now our services is, we're not seeing the error anymore about that, but it's now inside a do catch, but we still have to mark it with try and await. Sometimes I mix them up, sometimes I put await first, but it's always, Xcode's gonna tell you like, yo, you mix. They should do like an auto fix for that. So if you mix them up, you could just click the error button and it just switches up. So we have the photos now. So basically we're seeing this. We want to check though if this is working. So I could do print photos. And I want this, what we want to do, I want this to be called to get the data whenever the screen appears. I'll jump back to our photos view app. And there's a function that there's a modifier that you can use. So remember, I want to add a modifier to our VStat, to our screen. So I'll say that task. And we're going to make it that, or as soon as the screen appears, we call our API. So to do that, we'll say view model fetch photos. Then a flag us saying that since it's asynchronous, it needs an await. We'll do this. And really, we don't really want to show anything yet. So, because you see, I haven't changed the data that they view much. So we're going to see that. But what we want to see is if we're decoding the data properly and getting the add a breakpoint here. And a breakpoint is just like, you're going to stop the code for a bit and then look at some of the information that you have. Just to see if there's any error. So this is the success case. And then in the case where we have an error, we'll see this. So let's run. Okay, so the API gets hit. I see here that we have 5,000 values, which is insane. So we are getting the data, we're decoding it, but let's see if we can just look at what that data looks like. The play. Oh, I think I cleared it just. Do the console. I know we have it. Change this to dump. Okay, so we see the data here, so we know we have it. It's more so snap. That might just be an Xcode bug right now. Oh, so here. You see all this data here. We should still have been able to see it with print, but I don't know why it was bugging right there. But yeah, so you see all this data here. QSAS, whatever. And if I open our thing, you can see the same things. Whatever this is, AQSAS, BSA, whatever, QA, SMT. And then same thing for the second one. Oh, yeah, represented, yeah, same thing, whatever. All right, so we can close it again and then jump back focusing on good. So now we know that we are getting the data. We need to see if we can show the data in the screen. Let's just stop that. Get rid of these breakpoints. Don't really need to print error anymore. And one thing we can do now is we could create a property in our photos view model to make it that we can get the data from the API. That stores the data that we get when we call the API. So we could call it bar, just call it literally photos. And just say the type of photo model. And we could make that it defaults to an empty array. Right? So if we do it this way, okay, and then say instead of creating the photos here, I make it that whenever we get the photos data and decode it, I just make it that it sends that data, those model information to our photos property, which is this. Now, if I do it like this, we won't see anything in the view. And the reason for that is because the SwiftUI view might not update, or we might not get the data by the time the SwiftUI view is created. But that's the problem when I say the data wouldn't show. But what we want to do is that more than likely the data will be late. It's an API. So what we want to do instead is when the data arrives, even if the screen has already been created, we want the screen to re-render and show this data. So to do that, we got to mark the property with publish. And what will happen now is that I will jump back to photos view, and then inside our list view, what I'm gonna do instead is say that I want it to be create our list based on our photos property. So we're gonna say view model that photos. Create the list using our photos, and then we will get access to each photo that we're using inside our list by doing this. So this will be each photo inside our view model photos. And then we can use that separate. So just an example. So I'll comment this out, or row view for now. And I'll just put text and show what each property inside our view model is. So photo.title. And it's gonna give us one error saying that photo model requires that photo model conform to identifiable. So when we're using models like this inside our list view, we have to make it that they have an extra feature or conform to a certain type of protocol called identifiable. So to fix this, just jump to our models folder. And you see we're conforming, we have the decodable feature, but we need to conform also to identifiable. And the only thing that identifiable requires is that we have a property called ID. But the API already required that, so we're good. We don't have to really worry about that. So this works. If the API didn't have that property, you might need to just add in like a var ID equal UUID. So something like var ID for UUID, and then that would suffice. But we don't need that, so we can just get rid of that. So I'm gonna jump back to review, and this error should be gone now. Okay. And if we look in our preview, you see that we're seeing the data. We're just seeing the text. We're not seeing the row anymore because I removed that. So for each item in each photo model in our photos, we can use that for each row in the list. So now instead of showing just the title, let's make it that we can use our photos row view again. So get rid of this. And we're gonna get rid of the title that we have here. And we want to use photo inside our photos review. So we have to jump to our photos review, and you can see that for the photo, I'm constantly using photo.stack, and I'm using the same text each time. What I want to do instead is use the title from each photo and the photo from each model. So we have to introduce a new property to our photos review, say called photo, and this will be of type photo model. So that's going to represent photo that we had in our array. We have to update the preview too. To check. So we have to update the preview too. So we'll type in photo and just add like some basic photo model, something that you can use. On here, I'll say post. Then for URL, this, and let's just grab one of these URLs that they actually have. Copy this one as well. So now our preview is satisfied with that. So now we need to update our image that we're using, and we need to update the title. So the fastest one to do is the title. So we'll just replace this with photo title. And you see even the view will render just okay. And then the next thing we want to change is the part of each photo we want to download the image, show the image based on URL. So Apple kind of gives us like a default way of how we can do this. So we can just be like, we can use so the same way like how we have image, we can use something called a async image. So I will go up here and start by typing async image. And this is basically the image that you're showing using, using a URL. So you know like how you might have a URL that goes to an image whenever you click on like something, you can paste this, you can use this URL to show actual image in the app. But the problem with using async image is that it's not caching it. So each time you want to show it, you have to re-download it. Caching is just like you're saving it so you can use it for later. Saving some data or image or process that so that you can use it for later. It's more efficient and less costly. So like async image. And I'm gonna pick this one because I want to show a placeholder while we try and get the image or while the image is loading, and that's gonna be photo. So for the URL, we have to do photo.url. And then content is like basically the image that you're showing. So I want it to be like image, and then I'm gonna take the same modifiers that we were using and put it here. And then for the placeholder, I want to, that spinning loading view, the screen that you usually see when like some information on your app is loading. I want to show that, and that's called a progress view. I'll just go with this one for now. We can add text to it, but I'll go with this. And then we can get rid of this extra image that we have here. Right? Is it gonna? I'm still showing some error there. So, oh, this is fine right now, but since I want to show you, I'm gonna jump back over to photos view. And you see now that the photos row view requires a parameter called photo. which is this same parameter that we added. Where is it? Photos review. Yeah, it's this same parameter that we added here, which is a photo model. So we're like photos view. We're gonna update and add it. And we have that because remember, we're creating the list based on every photo in our view model. This is representing each photo. We just got to pass this. Now we should see a list of image of posts, like pretty much each photo row with like a photo, pretty much like this. Okay. And you see the progress view showing while the data is loading. Okay. But you notice that like even though we saw these images earlier, it's re-downloading them. That's because the data isn't being cached. So we can fix that. Honestly, I'm gonna probably use a third party for that, but we're not there yet. So let me actually run it first though. Run it on the side. Okay, so this is how it looks actually in the app. Doing that. Scrolling. If I scroll back up, it's re-downloading. That's like extra work you're doing. Not really something I'd want to do. So I will close this out. Again, that was an error just because I closed it close the simulator before using Xcode. All right, so now that we're seeing that, we see that yeah, we can get the data, but we see an error here in our console that says changes from the background thread is not allowed. Make sure to publish values from the main thread. So that's coming from our photos view model, and that's because we are after we get the data, which is a call being done asynchronously. Remember, we're updating the photos on asynchronously. We're not updating it on the main thread. And any UI update or changes like that that we want to make should always be done on the main thread. A quick fix for this is adding a decorator like main actor on our fetch photos. So if we run this again, you notice that we don't see this publishing changes. Okay. And if we go here, you see that we don't. But let's do some scrolling just to make sure that we're not seeing it anymore. Okay. Yeah, so we're good with that. So as I said, like the issue with the photos constantly downloading each time is not efficient. It's not the right way to do it. Usually you want to cache these images, but async image just doesn't provide caching abilities right now. Maybe in the future Apple will definitely update it and allow this, but for now it doesn't. So what we're going to do instead is add a use a third party library to handle the caching. We could create our own little basic cache using like a pretty much like a dictionary with like the UI image and then the URL as a key. But let's just grab like a third party library. Or we could use core data, or we could use a bunch of different features. Maybe I think Swift data too. All right, so we're gonna use a third party though, for in the interest of time. So we'll jump to file. Then we'll say add package dependencies. I prefer using Swift Package Manager for like adding dependencies, but I know some people do use CocoaPods, and you're just pretty much gonna look for SD web image UI. If you don't find it by just typing it in, you can just Google this first, and then it will point you to the GitHub repo, and just search for it based on that. Add package. Now make sure you add it to your target. I don't know why this isn't on by default. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's not. I select the first one. These are my tests targets. So one for my unit test and then my UI test. So make sure you might just have one based on the selection, but make sure you pick just your regular target and then hit add package. Okay. And just by doing that, we gain access to, we have to import it first. So when we say import, you just think of it that like, yo, for this area of the code, I want it to have access to an extra set of features. Or let's not say features, like an extra more tools. I want to have more tools that it can use, or more views. Like say we had, like how we have VStack image belong to SwiftUI. I want a couple more, but I want it from somewhere else. I want it from SD Web Image SwiftUI. The SD Web Image SwiftUI has a view called, I think it's Web Image. Web image, yeah, and it's really similar to async image. It takes a placeholder too, so let's grab this one. And so all we have to do, you're gonna see that it's really similar. So it's like at least laying out like the parameters are really similar. Go to that URL, and I'm pretty sure developers did that on purpose. Image, and then we can just copy this, paste that there, grab this, paste that there, and now we don't need async image anymore. But what we're gonna check on now is that whenever we load and download an image, it doesn't end up being re-downloaded again, since this handles cache. So let me go like this. So none of these 3 images are 4 images or 5 images loaded. I'm gonna scroll down some more, and everything looks like it's loaded already. So when I scroll up, I shouldn't see any progress views since everything has already been cached. So I'm gonna go down some more, and then I'm just gonna screw it up. You see no progress views. Everything looks like it's already loaded. So we're not re-downloading them each time, which can be mad inefficient. So let's stop it now. And now we're good with this. So we're able to get the data. We're able to get the data from the API, decode it, throw it in our view. And we're handling caching so that like we're not making unnecessary downloads user device. And you don't want to do that, especially because users aren't always home. So sometimes they're using their cellular data, which isn't infinite for everybody or unlimited for everybody. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do now is, remember, we're not handling errors at all. So if the API should fail or if the user doesn't have Wi-Fi, nothing's going to show. The one thing that we can do to do this, jump back, we need to update our API services, and we need to handle this error case, right? So we're gonna do this. So we're handling errors for if the URL has an issue. We're handling cases for if the status code is equal to 200. But what if this fails? What if the JSON decoder portion fails? Or what if the JSON decoder doesn't fail, but there's some other issue that comes up? We need to handle that. We'll handle that in the catch block. So for this case where something like that happens, I want to just show I just want to grab whatever description Swift recommends, and to get that I can find out by doing error.localize description. So I'm gonna make it that our custom errors can take that error recommended by Swift and show it to the user with some additional stuff from us. So add another case called custom error, and I'll make it like accept a string. That string is gonna be the localized error that Swift can give us. So get rid of this, and we'll say throw service error and custom, and then we're gonna pass it in error.localize description. Yeah, quick way. Now if we jump back to our view model, instead of just printing the error, what I want us to do is show the error in the screen using an alert. So we need a way how to keep the error message and a way how to make the SwiftUI app, the view, know that, yo, it's time to show an error alert. So we're gonna add two properties for this. There's a bunch of ways how to handle this actually. You could use a localized error, and that would handle pretty much showing it based on when the error property is updated. But we're gonna do it an even simpler way. So we'll be like publish var. I'll say show error alert. Error alert. I made this a boolean. Set this to false. And then that's gonna, whenever that toggles to true, that's when we show the error. But if it's false, we won't show the error alert. And then we're gonna have a different one for the actual error message that we want to show. Equal that empty string. And then in here, we're gonna simply just say that this error, we error type error property value, you automatically get it once we're inside any catch block. But you'll see that inside the do block, obviously we're not gonna see it. That's error message error property. But once you're in any catch block, you get the error. So it's basically any error that happens is well, you can get it from the catch block pretty much. But the thing is, this is not the type that I want. It's not my type. It's an error type. So I need to cast this error type, our type. So the less custom error. So error as passing it to our service error. Actually, before we do this, I think I'm gonna, so what we're gonna do instead is, now is just say error message is equal to error dot localized description. So this is Swift's just regular error message. I'm gonna change it so that we can use our custom service error and add readable error messages to it. So you're gonna notice that Swift's error messages are might not be the best thing that you want to show the user. So once we do that, we're gonna update our show error alert. And I'm just gonna do toggle. Basically, this just means if it's a boolean, it changes from false to true or true to. And it's see, I added them as published. So anytime these properties change, the view will update and show it, do what it has to do. So I'll jump back to our photos view, and I'm gonna add an alert. I'm gonna add an alert like this. And for this one, I'll just use it's presented. I see it requires a binding, some type of boolean that tells it when to show. It's either true, I show myself no, or don't show myself. And since it's a binding value, would be like $, and view model, and error alert. Error alert. And then inside our error alert, we want to show an alert. And we want it to have some message inside of it. The message we want to have is whatever we added inside our error messages property. Remember, in our view model. Error message. Okay. So whenever we have an error in the app, we want to show this error message. Okay, so whenever we have an error in the app, we want to show this error alert whenever this turns true anywhere in the app, in our view model, sorry. So let's test that out. And how we want to test this is like we're going to force an error. So if we jump to our services, we're going to change our endpoint just so that it's wrong. So I'm just going to get rid of the photos part, or maybe I'll just say add in some random stuff. And then when I run this, see that we see this error. It says like operation couldn't be completed, whatever. Not the best error description for the user, right? So if I add this and I run it again, you see that, yeah, it's working as usual again. So we can get all of this, but as I said, we don't like those error messages that we're showing. So we want to change the type of error messages that we're showing. So to do that, we could switch this to just having a localized error, which will give us like some extra properties or properties that we can use, like failure reason, etc. But we're going to keep it even simpler than that. So we'll add like a different property called string property called error message. A string property called error message. Message, and then this will be, so based on each case, we want to show a custom, more readable error message. We'll be like switch health. And then for invalid URL, we'll make it super simple. And I'll just say, yo, invalid URL. And then for invalid status code, I'm gonna write invalid status code. And then for a custom error, I want to use the error description that we get from SwiftUI, from Swift. I'm gonna say something went wrong. Do that. And then to use this property inside a string, I'm gonna do this. And then I'll just say, oh, I don't want to name that string error message. And then let's just change this and right here. Now, if we jump back to our view model, and right now it's gonna be the same since we're still the error from there. But if we do what we were doing earlier and cast our error, get rid of this, cast our error to a service error, transforming it. So we get error from Swift, and now we're transforming it to our error. We'll get a custom error. And then what I want to do in this case is pretty much say error message is equal to, and we'll say error message equal to custom error, error message, which is a property that we added. Then if that doesn't work, then error message is just equal to error.localize description. If we can't transform our error to our custom error, then we just use Swift's recommendation for the error message. I know we need to remember to show the alert. We'll do this again, toggle. And now if we force the API to fail again, changing this, some and running, you see that we see something went wrong, and then we see with error message here pretty much. If I want to say see our invalid URL, right now the URL is pretty much gonna work. So let's see if I add some, if we will get the invalid URL. We should. Okay, so we see something went wrong. Okay, so it's still casting to this. So that means it's passing this version here. The URL is able to convert to a string, which is weird. I'm not sure why Swift would allow that. But a different way how we can get this is by, instead of, in this case, since we know this is where the error is being thrown, we can say invalid URL whenever we get any issue there, just as testing. We run. Oh, I didn't remove the issue, so I didn't make a issue. I'll do this. I see it just shows pretty much invalid URL. But now that I know that our errors are working as expected, add that back as usual. And then let's rerun just to make sure everything is good. So we're still seeing this. Let's maximize again. And if we look at this now, so if we jump to our view model, you can see that one, we're getting data from the API and we're showing it using that. And we can also show different error messages that we might have and show the error alert. I guess the next thing that we could do is add unit tests, but this stream is getting pretty long. I kind of want to see. Oh, let's see. Maybe we'll add one unit test and then kind of the next stream will kind of pick up and just get some of the other unit tests going. So let's add one unit test. Remember our photos view model, we're going to test that. Remember our photos view model has a dependency as API services, and we don't want to use our real API, so we're not going to be using the default version. We're not going to use API services input. You have to make a mock version of API services. So if we jump to this here, and this is made pretty much the default things that Apple gives. I don't need all of that. What I really need is so one thing to note, I don't want to miss this. If we need this testable import photos JSONPlaceholder here, so that we can use classes and functions that we have in our actual code that aren't inside our tests. It's like it's importing our target so that we can do testing with its stuff. So the first thing we need is a type, a property called view model, and this is pretty much going to be our photos view model, and we're going to make that is required. And then the next thing is our services. We're going to need services, but we're going to pause adding services. Let's just delete. And we need to add a setup function. So the setup function is pretty much the first function that's get called when you start running a test. Okay. And we need to call a super.setup just so it does whatever it has to do first before start doing our stuff. And then we need a tear down function. And this is the function that gets called once we're done running our tests. And it also has some custom stuff that it needs to do once it's done. Once we have done our stuff, it needs to do clean up. All right, so our photos view model. So I want to be able to use a mock version of, I want to be able to test our photos view model. So I make it required, so I have to do say view model, call photos view model. But if I do this way, it's gonna be using our actual API services, which makes a real API call, which is not what I want to do. I have to make a mock version of it by making some other class that conforms to API services but doesn't make a API call. So we're gonna create a new folder. We're gonna call it. Oh, so I kind of lied a little bit about not creating any more folders, but this is for tests. I was talking about original target. So we'll create a folder called mocks. And then we'll make a new Swift file, not SwiftUI file. Call that mocks too. And then let's just call this class. I'll call this mock API service. Right. I need to remember we have to make it conform to API service. But you see, I can't access API service. So remember I was saying that we need testable here to be able to import all the stuff from our other target inside our tests, inside our unit tests. We have to do the same thing here. So we have to jump back here. I'm gonna say testable port JSON photos. Now if I try to add that API services, conform to it, it knows what that is. It knows where to find that. And then we just need to update what's required for this function, for this protocol. It requires this. I see it's literally the same thing. but we're not gonna make a real API call. We just want to test. So let's just give it some basic stuff right now. And we want to test that it's handling that we're doing like the loading, we're showing errors when we show errors in success cases once the data is as expected or so forth. And if we do any type of formatting, we can check if that's happening. But so what we can do now, we're gonna add a property called say results, photos result. And I'm gonna make this like a result type. It's gonna be an array of photo models. And the error type that's gonna return is service error. We're gonna make it optional. So what we can do now is switch on this photos results. And then in the success case will just be like pretty much in when our fake API call is successful, which we will be controlling. What do we want to check that is happening after this? All right, and then error message. So we'll just return photos. And then for our failure, we will throw error. This we could do throw service error known. So now that we have our mock API service, what we're gonna do now is add it to use as our replacement for our real service starter test. So like var service, and then it'll be like var service, and just be like mock API service. A bang there and making it hard. API service equal API service. And we want to use our fake service inside our photos view model. So we'll add that as a real property instead of the default value service. Okay. And then whenever we're done with our test, we want to make these values nil, just deallocate them. We don't need them anymore. So we'll say like view model is equal to nil. We could say like service is equal to nil. All we did right now was just preparing to write tests. None of this was real tests. This is just us prepping so that we could write unit tests. Now we're gonna write some unit tests. So the first test we're gonna write is what happens if like the API call is successful. So say every test that you write inside unit test should start with test and then kind of describe what the test is about. Test fetch to test. It doesn't really matter if the name's long. And another thing is that like it just like it's descriptive enough. Another thing is that some people use snake case for this. So just kind of up to you. So now inside of this, I like to set up where I'll have like the different stages of like the testing. So like given, when, then. So given is like whenever we based on some data, and then when the view modeler some action happens, what can we evaluate to have what are the expected results? Are they as expected? So as I do it, it's gonna make more sense. So I'll be like service that result. The result is equal to, remember we're using the result type, so the success case will be an array of photos. And we don't have any models right now, so let's just make fake mock photos. And we'll say, oh, I really want to write all of this over, so I'll just grab the one from a row view. Just make some quick change. Just pretty much just update that. And we're gonna make like an exact replica, like a second one, just so we can test how it's gonna respond. There are more than one thing in it. Photos. I did 12, but we don't have to. And we're gonna add these as cases that we want to check. So one photo. Okay. So based on this data that we have here, so it's basically a fake API call that returns these two mod data, and it's a successful fake API call. So we that provides us. So we want to check what happens when view model fetch photos is called. What are the values? What we expected? You see that because fetch photos is asynchronous, we also have to mark a test function. And remember, we have to. But remember, this function doesn't throw, because this is from our view model, so we don't have to worry about putting this in the catch. All right, so now our fake API call is gonna have this. It's gonna have an array of these objects, and then what we want to check is what the values are after the expected. So this is where we start as using Xcode. So I guess the first thing we can check is view model photos not empty? So we could say, or is it equal to this amount? I could say Xcode insert. I'll say view model photos count should be equal to 2, right? I run the test since we're passing in 2 elements here to mark equal to 2. So I run the unit by clicking this diamond. Honestly, like if you don't see this diamond here when writing unit tests, I would say check that actually wrote your test starting with word test, and if not, just try running the full test by clicking the one up here, and then it sometimes shows up after. And if that doesn't work, I would say just doing like command, either command U or command I, and then that would like pretty much, yeah, will definitely forcefully run all your tests. So we run our tests and you see that it passes. That's why you see this green check here. These are just some warnings. I think it's asking me because I'm forced on some values. Oh, it's saying that I'm using them as vars when I'm not changing them. I could use, but that should fix that one right now. And just for the sake of it, I'll run it from this top portion too. So you're gonna see the app kind of just doing some stuff, but yeah, tucks up. So we're good with that. We're getting back the 2 elements. We want to check too is that what is happening. So if we jump back to review, let's just go maximize. We're gonna check to see what happens in our view model so that we can have an idea of like, yo, this is what I want to test. So inside our view model, when we get the data, show alert is not toggled, right? Like show alert doesn't show. Also error message, if we're successful, show alert should be false and error message should be empty. So let's check that in our unit test. So first thing is show alert should be false, so we can say Xcode alert false. Say view model, show alert or alert should be false. And then we could also check to see that Xcode alert error message is empty. So the view model was to right, run this, and I just hit command. It's like running everything. Oh, view model of photos is not empty, so this should be not right. So let's run it again. But you see that the test is working. Like it knew it picked up that I didn't have this correct and it flagged it. So I'll run it again. Already in the test. Okay, run it again. For this time. Command U. Running. Crazy. It's like, oh, you know what it is? I'm running UI test 2, so that's why it's taking a little bit longer. I'm not just running our unit test. Forgot that we also add UI test. But you see, test succeeded. Alright, um so our tests are pretty much running fine in this case, just for our success. But one thing I noticed I thought about too is that sometimes API calls can take really long to load. So it would be good if we added like a spinner, a overlay, as the data is coming in. So again, all we need to do is pretty much add like a publish variable, and it's gonna be a boolean, and we could change this to be is loading. And when do we want this to be? We want it to be true whenever we first call the API, and then false after the API call returns the data. Also in the catch block too, because it would be true, and then if it failed and we hit the catch block, we want it to change back to false. So we will jump to our photos view now, and then we want to show it on top of VStack. So let's add a new feature. So the feature that we're gonna add is called overlay, and we're gonna basically check. So it's gonna expect, you want some view to show as an overlay. Overlay is just anything that you want to show on top of another view or so. So it'll be like if view model is loading, it's true. Then we show a progress view. Progress view with the title key. And this title key will be like fetching photos. And let's add a let's just add like fetching here, and then if we run it, then if we run it again so that we can give some time to see the loading. It sees really quick. The API doesn't take too long, that's why you don't see it that long. But what I can do is I can slow down that process a bit. So I'll say I'm gonna slow down this process where we actually call the API, so is loading will be true for much longer. What I'm gonna do is just wrap that in this async after. No, the 3. I'll make it that you can see whatever the error is. you can see the API take a bit more time. You can see the progress view a bit longer. And it's gonna flag us because okay, I see. Could do just so that we can see it. I think task has a way to. But I don't remember but if we wanted, I just want you to see what the is loading is like. So I will not update our is loading here, but it will still just be spinning constantly. So you see it right here, the fetching photos, spinning constant. We can add a background onto if we want by adding like a label, but for now we just want to make sure that's working. So let's get rid of this. Run it as usual. And see it shows for a second, and then just kind of. We would want to check that too. We want to check if it's loading is one showing right after we call the API, and then right after and then after we actually get the data, want to check that is loading is also false. So we can do pretty much we just want to check that is loading is false after. Then, because it's gonna be then. Okay. And this is a good way because then you're checking that like every so if a different developer comes in, makes some changes to is loading, this unit test will flag it and say, all right, you might need to check some up. So let's say false. The view model loading false. And run this unit test. I won't do command only because it's gonna run our UI test. I don't really care about that right now. Just run this. Okay, so you see that test successfully passed. I was kind of looking away, so I run it again one more. Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, basically I run the whole project too, actual app. Yeah, so basically we were able to use SwiftUI with SwiftUI using MVVM along with Swift concurrency to get data from the JSON placeholder API to show this data, show it in a list. We were able to add alerts as well as like a loading spinner, decode the model, etc. Um, as well as writing like our first unit test for a success case. Next thing we're gonna do is write like some error cases as well, and we could probably add in like some accessibility and some caching. So some caching, we're already caching the images using web image supply, but we're good if we could cache like the responses. But that's pretty expensive too. But this is the yeah, so those are some of like the updates that we've made so far. So I guess one thing is, oh yeah, we could add some UI testing. I've been working on improving on UI testing, so that's another big thing too. But that's our first test. I feel like this is a good portion to kind of pause the stream and like so we can take a break. And the next stream we'll take a look at more unit tests, say the failure cases and different cases that we want to test. Also, we're able to also test the services class. So right now we're really just testing the view model. We can actually test the services class by adding a URL protocol. And that we would basically replace our URL session here. And in our tests, we add so let me show you. So we'd add like a dependency, say called session. Make this a URL session. and then we'll initialize it with a default value, which is shared. It's the same thing we're using, right? But instead of using URL session, we say session. And then in our unit test, we would pass in a different object that we created that conforms to a protocol called URL protocol. Pretty much like this. But yeah, that pretty much ends the stream. If you like it, just like, follow, and yeah, later. Nerdy Audi. All right.